Hi, welcome to the first of a solo episode of Women Are the Medicine. I'm your host, Naz, and I'm really excited to be bringing this to you today. So the idea behind these solo episodes is that I want to be able to share and impart some of my wisdom and my experiences in a more digestible, inhalable way. So I'm going to be talking on topics that have really radically changed my life in some way that I feel would be useful for you. And my hope is that you take what resonates with you, you think about those things that perhaps aren't always in alignment with your thoughts, and then you can discard the rest. So let's get started with today's episode. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is all about how you see the world and why it matters so much. Now, Women Are the Medicine is a partnership business. So I have a business partner, my wonderful friend, Rachel, and her and I have very similar worldviews. And whilst we do have those similar worldviews, they align in many different respects. And I'm going to share some of those with you today. There are also elements where we don't necessarily agree. And we also sometimes use the different language to describe the same thing. And all of that is okay, right? It is impossible to have one absolute truth, one absolute reality that applies to everybody's lives. So why your worldview matters is that how you see the world, how you perceive the world and the rules and the roles is going to determine how you show up in that world. And it's so ingrained in you, it is coming from your subconscious. So you don't even have to think. You don't wake up and go, what's my worldview today? You already know, you already have cultural worldviews, you have worldviews that have been passed down by your friends and your family. And then there are worldviews that you start to absorb from external sources and reading and working with mentors and coaches and spiritual leaders. So your worldview is not a once and done. And it's definitely not a doctrine for you to completely and utterly adhere to faithfully without ever questioning. In fact, worldviews should be stretched, should be loosely held, but with strong conviction, which is a wonderful phrase from Tom Bellew, who's an enormously successful influencer and coach, I suppose. So your worldview matters. How you see the world determines how you show up in the world. It determines your attitudes and your beliefs, your energy, the choices you make and the choices you don't make. So I want to give you an example that's really easy to understand. And that is that if you see life as a game, if life were a game, the way that you would see the world would determine whether or not you're playing Monopoly or Scrabble or Snakes and Ladders. So for the purposes of this analogy, let's use the example of you see your life as a game of Monopoly. So if you're playing a particular game, you know the rules. You know what you can and you can't do, and you're rolling the dice, and there's a set way to play the game, and there's a destination, right? You're trying to win. Someone else who's playing the game of Scrabble has a completely different set of rules. It's a completely different destination. And that doesn't cancel out, this is really important, that doesn't cancel out your worldview. So in order for your worldview to be true to you, it doesn't mean that everybody else is wrong, right? Everybody else's reality is utterly unique to them. There are going to be crossovers with other people, but essentially the way that people show up in the world, the way that they form their reality is that they have a certain set of beliefs and a worldview, and that is that. You don't need for somebody else's game to be wrong. You don't need to try and convert somebody in order for your worldview, your game to be true to you. Okay, so that's the first point. So as I mentioned, Rachel, at the beginning, we do have areas in our worldviews that do differ. And actually, I really, really welcome that, because Rachel, and I know she does too, Rachel and I respect one another. We admire one another. I see her as a sovereign human being who, has every right to have her own worldview and her own paradigm that she lives in. But at the same time, when her and I enter a discussion about our worldviews and how we see the world, we can also stretch our viewpoints and start to evolve that worldview. And actually, the more that you sink into your truth, the more you're able to allow all of these different worldviews and all of these different perspectives to exist, to coexist. Okay? So one of the areas that Rachel and I do absolutely align on, and what I want to share with you today, because it is very, very helpful when it comes to your worldview, is whether or not you are in below the line or above the line thinking. Now, this is a concept that is coined by a wonderful coach called Jim Detmer. I'm not going to go into it fully here, but I just want to give you perhaps a reframe on how you see the world. So most people are going through life in what we call below the line thinking. So their worldview is that everything that's happening in life is happening to them, right? That they have very little control over the things that are happening in their life. Life is happening to me. If something goes wrong in their lives, it is someone else's fault. You could also call this victim consciousness. And we're all susceptible to that, right? Even if you're a happy-go-lucky person and you believe yourself to not be in victim consciousness, there are going to be days where, the weather is really shitty. The weather is shitty and you feel low, right? Because it is raining, your mood has sunk, right? That is below the line thinking. And it happens because we're human beings. So we're not ever necessarily going to be able to rid ourselves of this way of being. It is something that we learn to build awareness on. It is something that we learn to surpass, to grow out of, because the next sort of level or stage of this way of thinking is above the line thinking. And when you are in above the line thinking, you don't believe that life is happening to you. You believe that life is happening for you. So if this was a game, if you were in victim consciousness or below the line thinking, you'd be playing that game of Monopoly. You'd know the rules. You'd have very little control. It'd be, throwing the dice and seeing where you land and what everyone else is doing. It would be happening to you. The rules would be the rules. If life was happening for you and you were in above the line thinking, you would be creating the rules. The game of Monopoly would have rules that you would invent that would suit you, that you would be able to see any setbacks, any drawbacks, anything that happens to you that perhaps is less than desired as an opportunity for growth, as a lesson for you to learn from, as something that is going to help you to evolve and excel. And this is when people usually come to us for coaching. Very, very, very often they are in that below the line thinking. Life is happening to me. I'm in a relationship with someone and it's not going well. I don't like my job, the state of the world, everything is weighing on me. And it's very, very disempowering to be in that below the line thinking. So the invitation is to start to widen your worldview and perhaps to start to play with the thought that life is happening for you. So the game is kind of rigged in your favor. And that the things that are sent your way to challenge you are there in your best interests, are there to stretch you, are there to help you choose your highest self. And I'll give you an example. I used to be a relationship coach, and many of the women who came to me were in relationships with someone who was quite dominating, potentially narcissistic, and came to me and they were very much in that victimhood because they were being victimized, right? Let's not forget that there is a distinction there. And in order to help them to gain their power back, what we had to work through was this understanding that to a degree, when we're in victim consciousness, we're letting things happen to us. We are being passive. And the way out of this is to make a stand, to make a powerful choice and say, I have ownership over this and I'm going to step into my higher self and I'm going to put my best interests at heart. And usually what happened with my clients is either the relationships would rebalance, right? Not every partner is narcissistic. And when you readdress the balance of that partnership, you can have a more equitable relationship and a more harmonious marriage. But when it was, the situation was so bad where my client would decide, you know what, I have enough self-worth now that I'm going to step out of this and I'm not going to choose this for me. I'm going to choose something else, even if that something else feels really painful and really scary and completely out of my comfort zone. I'm going to choose that because I am worth it. And then later down the line, looking back, it's so amazing to me how many women can look back with not condoning what's happened to them, but with an open heart and with compassion for themselves and say, you know what? Me leaving that person was the best thing I ever did. Actually, it was the catalyst of me recognizing that I deserve more that has enabled me to step out of that. So, not saying that every challenging situation that comes along feels like it's good for you, or that it's there for a reason. It's not. It's much, much more nuanced as that. But what does help is when you have this worldview that life is happening for me, life is a game, I'm co-creating this game, I'm kind of making up the rules. Obviously, it's not a game with infinite possibilities in terms, because we live in a structure, right? We live in a society. There are rules to existence, but there are limitless possibilities in what is available to you, right? Some people are just further away from those possibilities than others. So our invitation and my invitation to you is to start to see the world with fresh eyes. Start to see the things that come into your life instead of reacting to them and blaming and pushing them away and resisting and going, okay, what can I learn from this? What's possible for me if I see this differently? And a coach of mine that I love, Lisa Toste, used to say, what's great about this? Which when you're in a situation that feels like you want to shout and scream because it's so frustrating, what's great about this is a question for someone who is very deeply aware, right? We're not all going to be able to do it straight away. But it is something that helps us to reframe. And just one last word on this below the line, above the line thinking. Something that's also can happen when you start to recognize that you are co-creating life, that you do have this agency of choice, that you are empowered to create a reality, to change your worldview, to change how you show up in life. What can happen is you look back at all the years that have gone by and go, oh my God, I've let so much slide. I've let so much happen. It's my fault. I could be in a completely different place here. And what happens is you actually slip into victim consciousness. You slip into below the line thinking for a little bit. And that's completely normal. That's completely normal. We're not all meant to wake up at the same time to this. We are not meant to drag people into this worldview. But when you start to have agency and you recognize that you have choice, conscious choice about how you show up in the world, about your worldview, about whether you see this all as being in your favor, right? It absolutely changes the way that you show up in the world. So I hope that this has resonated for some of you. Please let me know. I would love, love, love to hear from you. And I'll put some resources in the show notes for those of you that are interested in taking this and looking into this a little bit further. But for now, see you on the next call.